In the comments below, please put your #1 saw that you bring out with you on your bushcrafting outings and trips, so we can all kind of have a discussion and see which ones are good and which ones are not, because sometimes it's not so obvious for everyone. Hey everyone, Dave here, and today we're going to be talking about these two saws, the Silky Zubat and the Silky Sugowaza, and which one is better for bushcraft. In my opinion, there's one clear winner out of these two guys. So let's just get into it and talk about the pros and cons for a bushcraft saw, not necessarily just a saw in general. We start with the Silky Zubat, and I really like the sheath. I really like the design. I really like the way that this part back here clips on and clips off onto your belt. This is a very packable size. You can get it into the majority of bags, and if you can't, you can always strap it onto the outside, or you can just wear it on your belt. This one is the 330. It's a very good length for, things that are a 3-4 inch diameter, which is kind of the perfect size for bushcraft. That diameter wood is what you will be mostly sawing, between 2 to 4 inches, maybe 5. It depends where, when, what you're doing, all that sort of stuff. Now the Silky Sugowaza is quite a lot bigger. It's got this kind of sword-like guard, which is kind of pointless. The handle's a little bit bigger. The blade is longer, the blade is thicker, the teeth are larger. This saw can saw better than the Silky Zubat. It is faster at sawing. The problem that I found with this one in particular, because you have large teeth and because you have quite thick stalk, it's actually thicker than the Zubat stalk. It requires more effort when you're pulling. So you burn more energy when using this saw. You technically will saw through something faster, but you do need to give it a bit more of a tug to get it through the wood. The teeth on the Zubat are a little bit smaller and the thickness is a little bit smaller. It requires less effort to get it going on the wood. If you're very gassed out, it's easier to use this saw, basically. If you're very tired, it's hard to get this one going because it requires a bit more force and you're tired, your arm's burning, your muscles are on fire. If you know anything about sawing wood, after one cut, you're gassed out pretty much. So I like the Zubat in that regard, is that it might not cut faster, but you can continue to cut even if you're gassed out, because you don't need to necessarily be putting a lot of force into those cuts. Both of these saws cut on the pull stroke. I'm totally used to this now after years of using Silkies. I've never broken a Silky. If you're used to pushing on and not pulling when you're doing your saw cuts, it might take an adjustment period, which for me was very small. It didn't take very long for me to get used to using Silky saws. Now it's just habit. When I saw, the effort is on the pull, not on the push. You don't want to bend and break these saws, which some people end up doing, but they're just using it wrong, to be blunt. I've never broken a Silky. Now, the Silky Sugowaza sheath is definitely a downgrade from the Zubat, even though it's more expensive. The belt loop is just a basic leather belt loop, and I've actually clipped this around back, but this part here, these stupid little, I hate these clips. These are so stupid. On knives and on saws, these are the most annoying things in the world. They get in the way all the time when you're trying to pull your knife out or pull your saw out. It's always like in the way, especially when you have this like big sword guard thing. This thing is like always in the way when you're trying to put it in the sheath, out of the sheath, and you need it for retention. Otherwise this saw will come out of the sheath. That's a huge flaw. I don't know why they just didn't do the Zubat system. That system's awesome. I love it. When I'm using this in the woods and this is actually on my belt, I do clip this and it just sits in the back of my belt loop around back, so it's not in the way when I'm pulling the saw in and out. And as long as I'm not upside down, the saw is not coming out of the sheath. So it requires quite a lot of upside downness, if that's a word. So I'll put it on my belt like that and it's good to go. The problem that I found with this guy here is the extra length, the extra width. It does knock into more things. It catches on more branches. It gets caught on the salal and the dull Oregon grape that we have around here. It bangs around a lot more than the Zubat. When you see the length, it's a lot smaller, so it doesn't, this is feels like it's almost touching the ground, even though it's not. when you're hiking around, it bangs into everything pretty much. So it's not that functional really, having it on your belt. I know that people might strap it to their leg. I would never do that bushcrafting. Maybe if you're an arborist and you're cutting trees all day, that might be something you want to do. Considering that this saw has longer reach and does saw better, it might be a better saw for that purpose. But the context that we're talking in is bushcraft, and in that bushcraft context, Silky Zubat is the better saw. It's more packable, it goes on your belt easier, the handle is more ergonomic in my opinion for a one-handed hold. It's not so big, and if you really need to, you can get two hands on this guy, but most of the time you're stabilizing with one hand and then sawing with the other. This feels like such a good balance size-wise that it's not too unwieldy when you're sawing. It feels natural, like an extension of your arm basically. The Sugawaza doesn't quite have that feel to it. The handle's a little bit bigger. It feels a little bit more awkward. It's got more weight to it. It feels a little bit more unwieldy than the Zubat. So to wrap up these videos, both these saws are good. You know, I think that if you had a cabin or a homestead or a farm, which I don't have any of those, maybe you'd want the Silky Sugowaza because it does saw better. But for bushcraft, it's 100% Zubat all day, every day. I will choose this every time. And even compared with, say, I have the Gomboy as well, I will bring the Zubat over the Gomboy any day of the week as well because it's that nice. I like it that much. I won't downgrade and bring a smaller saw most of the time. This is the smallest saw that I will bring, and I just think it's the perfect saw for most bushcraft tasks. So if you don't have a 330 Zubat, highly recommend you pick one of these up. I think it will improve your bushcraft game, especially if you have, you know, just a regular bow saw or even a Boreal 21 or, you know, just a Gomboy, even the big boy probably. The Zubat I think is better because it has ergonomic handles, it has a sheath, it can, you know, you can attach it to your belt, so when you're carrying wood back to your camp, your saw is on your hip with you and you're not losing it, you're not throwing it in the bush, it goes right back into its sheath like a knife. That's a big thing. You don't want to lose your saw because you've put it down on the ground. If you got the Boreal 21, I've done it before, you put it down on the ground, it's hard to find because you don't have an easy sheath right next on your hip that you can just put it away, pick up your wood, go to camp, and repeat. And the Zubat does saw better than the Boreal 21. I have had that saw, and the Zubat is faster at sawing. There are reasons to get the Boreal 21 over both of these saws too, just the size and the blade replacement and all that other stuff, so take that into consideration as well. But I do really recommend the Silky Zubat. If you haven't tried it out, try it out for bushcraft. You won't be disappointed. It's going to be a great companion with you on all of your trips. If you like this video, comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.